Hey, so this video will be sort of a review of Bloody Rose, which is the second book in the Kings of the Wyld series. Um, Although, when I say review, review implies I finished it, which I didn't. So I guess this video is going to be more like why I didn't finish it. So, this book suffers some rather severe problems, and it also so I'm going to approach this from as empirical of a way as I can, being big brain about like sort of writing concepts. But other thing as well, which I want to get across to you first, is that there is just a real subjective nature to this, where sometimes a book just doesn't grab you from the start, and you're just trying to, you're trying to give it your all, right? Because like, this book's been recommended, the last one was good. I want to I want to try like give it a chance, but it just doesn't, it's not doing it for you, and so this book certainly suffered from that, just from the very beginning for me, where, sorry, I've got fucking coronavirus. But this book suffered that sort of problem from the very beginning for me, where I didn't get into it, okay? So that's just a subjective thing. It may be that you would be able to overlook some of the flaws I'm about to discuss because you would get into it and you'd be like, oh, it's a bit flawed, but I'm enjoying it, right? So let's just get that out of the way. So this book, I identified two kind of major problems with it that really put me off and probably prevented me from finishing it. So the first problem is that it has a passive protagonist. That is to say, the protagonist just sort of gets swept along. Nothing that happens is like at her behest. She doesn't start anything. She does finish things sometimes. Like sometimes there'll be a fight going on, where she's like, "Oh God, I didn't want to get into this fight, but now I'm in this fight. Well, I may as well finish it." And you're like, but even then, even when that happens, it's often she gets bailed out by other characters and stuff. So for example, the book begins with her joining a band, like a roaming band of mercenaries, and then going off with them to do stuff. Right, we'll get into why I said stuff rather than what they're actually doing. But yeah, so she goes off with him to do stuff, right? And in another book, imagine if a book starts with, yes, I want to join this band. I want to join a band. It's going to be great. It'll be awesome. That's my goal. I'm going to work towards my goal. I'm going to join the band, and then when I'm in the band, I'm going to be working towards this goal, right? That would be an active protagonist who's trying to do stuff, and you might be able to get into it because like, oh, I support this goal. This seems cool. Let's go along on the journey. But what you get instead is, oh, this band's here. Oh, I wonder if I could join them. Oh, it's interesting. I can join them. Oh, I've joined them. That's crazy. Oh, I'm going along in this fight. Wow, I'm doing this fight. This is amazing. It's crazy, right? And so she never directs, like, she's never directing the plot in any way. So that's one big problem, and that made it really hard for me to sort of get into her character, because I'm like, well, what are your goals? What do you want? Because I can't be interested in where you're going and supporting where you're going, because I don't even know where you're going. So that's the character side of the issue, but the same issue is sort of reflected in the plot, and what I mean by that is that there is no plot. So, or it might be a plot. I mean, because I stopped about halfway through, but up until halfway through, you get told what I think is the plot at about 50% away through the book, which is quite difficult to deal with because you don't know where you're going. So, for example, Tolkien, his two famous books, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, are the exact opposite of this, where it's a quest book and you know exactly what the plot is from the very beginning. We're going to go destroy this ring, or we're going to go take this dragon's gold, right? And it's like very obvious, and the entire time we're working along the way to this goal. So, in this book, what we get given is we get given a goal in that they're going to some town to slay a monster, but you don't know anything about this town, or the city, I guess, you have no context about why it might be a good place to go or an interesting place to go, and you don't know what the monster is. And I think the author is trying to build up this big reveal, oh, the monster is this, but I don't know anything about this, so I can't get invested. So if you say to me, I think bring this into a real life context, if you're like, Michael, I'm going to go to Sydney, and I'm going to go visit the Opera House, and I'm going to go take lots of photos, it's going to be awesome, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that sounds like a great trip. And I might, and I want to go, right? Because it's awesome. But if you say, Michael, I'm going to some random town in Europe to do something, I'm like, what? This doesn't mean it. Like, it might be cool, but it doesn't mean anything to me, and I'm not compelled. I don't know what's going on. And you could argue that some people might be more interested in the mystery aspect, like, oh, they're doing a mystery thing. I want to read along to find out what the mystery is. But it's not really that built up, and it's kind of obviously what it's going to be is just going to be some big monster, and you're like, well. So I just didn't really get into this book. Some of the characters were interesting. There's one lady who like tattoos stuff on her arms and they turn into monster stuff. That's cool, and it still has the same vibe. The same interesting cool monsters from last time. And there are some interesting themes, sort of. Maybe they get dealt with later on. So the theme that's brought up is that is the idea of like evil and monsters, right? So the idea that just because you're a monster doesn't make you evil. Like what you have inside is what matters, right? And this is a pretty common theme. We've seen this, in literature for 100 years now. This idea of when authors try and bring up, because often it was in the context of race in the past. Maybe now it's in the context of perhaps gender or LGBT rights or something, but the idea is that what you have on the outside doesn't define what you have on your inside. And the metaphor here is that, there might be monsters on the outside, but actually, they're fine people. They just happen to be a monster, right? And so that idea is brought up, and so at some points, the idea is brought up like, oh, you're killing monsters in arenas is bad because we don't know if they're actually bad. They might be, but we don't know, right? Okay, so that's an interesting idea. But on the other hand, multiple times they're supposed to celebrate them killing monsters, and you're like, well, I don't know how to feel about this. Are they emotionless, like heartless killers who we just need to deal with, or are they people we should be thinking about their, how like their morality of killing them and stuff? So it's very thematically. It didn't really work. The character, the main character is very passive, and the plot is rather non-existent. So yeah, that's why I didn't finish it. I didn't enjoy it. I would not recommend this book. Thanks very much for watching.